name is Kaya Peterson, and I'm a board member with the Sustainable Business Council. Thanks everybody for being here tonight for our small business healthcare panel discussion. If there's food and drink here, the food is donated by the Missoula Community Food Co-op, and the beer is from Big Sky Brewing. We also have Big Sky Brewing president here. So please enjoy that, and we're actually just going to dive in and get started. And if the panelists could introduce themselves real briefly. Starting with you,
My name is Adam Sangster. I'm the president of Apex Human Resources. We're an HR, payroll, and benefit outsourcing company.
My name's Tim Garden. I'm an agent for Western States Insurance. I primarily deal with small group health insurance, individual coverage, and life insurance. But my expertise is in the small group health market, which ranges from 2 employees to 50.
Steve Seninger, a health economist from the School of Business, University of Montana, and have done research work on health insurance coverage in Montana, including for small businesses.
And I'm Neil Leathers, president of Big Sky Brewing Company. We tend to shop our insurance around whenever we have a horrible increase, and that's happening this year. So right now I'm in the process of investigating different plans, looking at high deductible health plans and HRAs, HSAs, and all those acronyms out there. So this is pretty good timing because I'm right in the midst of all this kind of stuff as a business person.
So as you know, most of the Sustainable Business Council members are small businesses, and the idea for the panel was, we're seeing what's happening in the market, we're seeing how difficult it is for people to get health care. What are some resources that are out there? What are some of the challenges? What are some of the solutions? So we've got a great broad base of perspectives here tonight, and hopefully you'll learn something. We try to make these pretty informal, so when you have questions, please pipe up, and we will leave lots of time for question and answer at the end. So Steve is going to get us started and give us some background on healthcare statistics and where we stand right now.
Okay, as I said, I'm an economist, which is a dangerous thing to admit in public these days, but nonetheless, that's what I do. And work in the Bureau of Business and Economic Research in the School of Business, dealing primarily with health care, health insurance coverage, and beyond that, social policy issues related to health care. What I wanted to do is very briefly, I don't want to give you death by PowerPoint, so I just want to run through a couple of slides real quick and kind of lay out some data, particularly findings from some studies that I've done here in Montana, and sort of compare and contrast that to some national data. A lot of what I tell you, like on this first slide, is things that are very commonly known by now. Healthcare spending is a major component of our economy. Nationally, it's around $2 trillion, give or take $100 billion here or there. And when we look at it relative to gross domestic product, it's a very large percentage. Similarly in Montana, when we look at healthcare spending here in the state, it tallies out at about $6.5 billion a year, total spending for all kinds of health care, health insurance, etc. And it likewise clocks out at about 16% of our gross domestic product here in the state of Montana. So that's sort of a benchmark to say that it's real big, and it's not getting any smaller. And particularly, the big concern about health care, in addition to the level of spending, which makes us spend the most in the world of any country, the most per capita, and also gives us about 47 million people who are uninsured at the same time. It's a pretty bad bargain. But the real kicker, and I think this is really what people are concerned about tonight from a small business perspective, is what about the cost of health care? And when you track out health care costs, one way that it really has an impact is obviously in terms of health insurance premiums. And the story is a rather discouraging tale. National data, these are percentage annual changes, so those aren't percent levels. Those are percent change on year previous in health insurance premiums overall. And when you look at that upper line with the nice color, the fuchsia, it's above everything else. And it's been up, it's coming down. By and large, throughout the 2000s, it's been double-digit annual increases in health insurance premiums every year. That's a very broad average. It's over big, small businesses, individual policies, group policies, etc. But it's a daunting number, and it's been well in excess of workers' earnings and overall inflation. So that's really part of the problem, is healthcare cost along with the large amount of spending. And it's kind of I guess it's sort of a no-brainer, because if healthcare costs are a lot, particularly measured by health insurance premiums, we spend and we consume a lot and we spend a lot. So it kind of works out that way. The impact of that is that it's hard on employers. Again, some of this is not very surprising. Higher cost to employers and to consumers. And because I do some work too on families and kids in the state, I always like to translate what this means for a state like Montana. It translates into 35,000 kids in the state without any health insurance whatsoever, public or private, and puts us in like the top 5 states in the country in terms of a high uninsured rate for kids. Now, when we look at Montana's uninsured, the studies that I've done in the School of Business have focused both on people who are uninsured as well as on employers. And when we look at who's uninsured in Montana, it's kind of a moving number. It depends on which year you look at, who's giving you the number, whether it's the Census Bureau or me or the Department of Health in Helena. But roughly speaking, as a target, it comes out to about 160,000 Montanans who are uninsured. That does not include the underinsured. And basically, when you look at the demographic profile, it's a lot of us in this room, in a sense. I mean, it's adults with high school degrees or higher, a lot of people who are working, and a lot of people who are self-employed or work for small firms. One of the very distinguishing characteristics of the uninsured in Montana, people who don't have any health insurance, is they work for small businesses. In fact, you can use that as a predictor, pretty much as a single variable equation to predict uninsured rates around the state. This basically reflects some research we did in 2003, then we did a follow-up in 2006, and we went out and surveyed a representative sample of Montana firms from small to large, and it shows the percent of firms by size category that offer health insurance in the 2 years. So we're particularly tonight looking at small firms of 10 or fewer employees, which represent roughly about 60% of all business establishments in the state. If you take all the businesses in the state, about not quite 2/3 are small, and they represent about 1/3 of all employment. So they're a really key component of the economic landscape in Montana. And when you look at the offer rates, the percent offering health insurance, I guess the good news is that there's been a slight uptick in this smaller category between the 3 years, 03 and 06, from 37 to 40, 52 to 53. So roughly speaking now, about half of the small firms in the state offer health insurance to their workers. The question would be then, when they offer it, how does that compare to national? And we're basically right about on the national, which has been declining in terms of small firms of less than 10 workers. That's my definition of small firms, because it's more operative here in Montana. Usually when you go outside the state and they say, oh, small firms are, 0 to 100. And we call 100 big firm in this state. Anyhow, declining offer rate nationally, and that's continuing to go down. And I bet if I had 2008 data and certainly 2009 data for both the state and the nation, it's going to show an even further decline, given the economic hard times that we're coming into. The other part of it, though, is how many firms offer health insurance to all employees. So we got about half the small firms that offer the health insurance. Next question is, well, how many of them offer it to everybody? And that's a little bit different picture, because when you look at the percent of firms, again, for those 2 survey years, representative sample sizes of about N equals 500, it's not all workers. Although, again, there's been some improvement on the small firm end as far as the percent of firms who are offering it to all workers. So, that's looking good in terms of an increase, and it almost makes an encouraging story. When you ask why do Montana firms not offer health insurance, this is all of these firms with a large representation of of small firms in this response pattern, it comes out to be premiums, the cost, et cetera, of health insurance. Again, not surprising. And that pattern's the same for 2003, so it holds up pretty consistently. And this is sort of the downside of it. We see there's a slight increase in the percent of small firms offering, a slight uptick in the percent that are offering it to all employees. But, and again, no surprise here, what's happened from '03 to '06 on average, this is overall small firms, is that the increase in premiums for individual policies for the employer has gone up 24%. For family coverage, it's gone up 13%. And then when you look at the percent that's gone up for workers' share, it's a much more significant percentage increase. So there's been like this cost shift. Small employers are between a rock and a hard place. They want to offer health insurance, premiums go up. What do you got to do? Eventually, you got to start shifting some of the cost to your workers, and I think we see that here in these patterns. I'm about at the end. I just did want to make one other comment, sort of another factoid to throw out there to think about in terms of the cost. That slide I just showed on the family and the individual percentage increases. Nationally, when we look at the overall cost of family insurance coverage from an employer, basically from 1999, this is national, and I think it's probably reflected to some extent in Montana, the increase in the cost of family coverage for an employer has gone up between 1999 and 2008 by 120%. Okay, so it's a huge, in 1999 it was around 4,000 something, in 2008 it's 12,630. So there's this 120% increase. And when you look at the overall rate of inflation over that period, that's about 29%. And when you look at worker wages over that same period, that's about 34%. So, you know, kind of give you a benchmark of what's happened to health insurance premium costs. Real quick conclusion, we do have Insure Montana, a small business program from the state of Montana, run out of the state auditor's office. A mixture of tax credits if you're currently offering health insurance, or premium assistance in a purchasing pool if you don't offer. It's currently fully booked up. And I don't know the number of firms that are in there.
There's about, I want to say 650.
Yeah,
in that.
sounds like 650,
And
680.
they've got a waiting list on that program that it was full probably the end of October of '07, and they've got a waiting list on that that they consider 2 years long on that program. It's, from my perspective, for small businesses, that's a great program because it's a program that's paying you money back to have a health plan for yourself and for your employees. The drawback to it is they've got a budget, and that budget, I think, it's $10 million, and they've got 60% of it going to the purchasing pool, and they've got 40% going to the tax credit. With that, the program's been in place. It'll be on its third year, and the increase, the increases on it are about 5%. The first year there was nothing. Last year there was a 12% increase after everything was said and done, and this year they're looking at about 4.5%. So I consider, the way I look at that is because the state's involved with that, the carrier is doing a better job of managing that money because the state is their checks and balances. So that program has been running extremely well. With the clients and prospects that I've got, I have suggested at least to get on that program. If you need health insurance now, that's fantastic. You can put a small group plan in place. But then that tax credit becomes available to you when your number comes up. And for some groups, that can fund half the premium through the year. So it's been a fantastic program. With the legislature going into play in 2009, They need to open that up because they need to put more money into that program. Small businesses like yours then could be eligible for that program, because once you're in it, you're going to be in it.
Yeah, Phil?
As you talk about health insurance costs going up, the amount you pay to have health insurance, how does that correspond with the increase in the cost of health care itself? Doctor's visits, hospitals, lab, all the rest of it.
The broadest measure of healthcare cost is what is affectionately known as the GDP deflator for healthcare. It's a price index deal, and that basically has been going up at about 7.5% a year. 7.5, some years 6.8. So what's been happening is health insurance premiums have gone up in excess of the overall cost of inflation, of healthcare cost. The other thing to remember too is that when we talk about healthcare costs, there's sort of a lot of different ways to talk about it. The $2 trillion is one that's thrown out there a lot. Well, that's not really cost, that's total spending. So you have to really look at claims experience from the insurer's perspective. You have to look at a hospital price index, a doctor's price index, this deflator thing I just mentioned. And the other thing to keep in mind is that that $2 trillion or our $6 billion is, it's sort of like principles of economics. It's price times quantity. I pay a price and I consume so much health care. So I can consume a whole lot. We're big consumers in this country, those that have insurance. And I can also start paying higher prices if prices are going up. And a classic example of that would be brand name pharmaceuticals. If you look at brand name pharmaceuticals, which are advertised to get you to buy and consume more, you consume more, and then the prices are going up on those like 25 and 30% a year. So that's another example of healthcare inflation in terms of that specific item. One of the things, I guess 2 final points, and I'll be quiet. And I think maybe Tim or somebody's going to talk a little bit about Baucus's plan, because that right now there's a lot of talk about healthcare reform. There's been a lot of talk for a long time. Health economist dies and goes to heaven for a change. And when he gets to heaven, he talks to God and says, will we ever have healthcare reform? Will we ever see a single payer system? God sighs and says, not in my lifetime. You know, so this debate's been around for a long time, and we still have things coming up now. Senator Baucus has a plan that's beginning to emerge, which incorporates the small business component that Tim was talking about. He's talking about a health insurance exchange where companies can go into a better kind of pooling environment over a broad base, and then expanding public health. So, and the thing to remember is that even though we're in a recession, depression, I don't know what you want to call it, it's bad. It's not as if we can ignore health care. We have to take care of ourselves. We have to deal with health for ourselves and our kids and our family. And so the cost issue is still major. This whole thing about the auto bailout thing, the CEO of GM was interviewed last night, and he said, well, we're taking care of a lot of problems now, so we think even though we're in tough shape, things are going to get better. We've got the $101 billion fund for health care benefits and pensions for our workers pretty well stabilized. And you're sitting there thinking, $101 billion for GM, one company. That's amazing. So the point is that even though we are in economic hard times, and apparently will be for a while, this is something we can't ignore. So I'll bow out and let somebody else jump in.
Can I ask one quick clarification on your first slide that was the fuchsia line?
Right.
Those are premiums.
Right.
Everyone has premium, and it was coming down precipitously, or? And why? Why is it coming down?
It's coming down average nationally. It's a good question. I don't know that I can put all the factors into that. It's down now to about 6.8% in the past year. It could be preventative health programs are beginning to pay off for some insurers. It could be that providers are actually holding back on their price increases. When I look at some data on hospitals, for example, hospital price index has been fairly stable for the past several years, and that's a big component of healthcare cost. Probably a number of different factors that are affecting that.
But you're not predicting a trend that direction.
I don't. Given that the overall inflation rate is still around 6 to 7%, I can't imagine it's going to come down any lower than that.
Well, see, I know quite a few people that are paying more as their share of the premium. Their premium copay is higher, and their copay on direct claims is higher. And the result is that the amount of premiums that the employer pays seems to be going down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a widespread thing, do you think?
The
It's a
cost
shift in
shift.
cost to the individual.
Yeah. The cost shift is happening, and what that's doing nationally, and I think in Montana, is that people are then, even though health insurance is offered on the job, they're declining it. So you're seeing a larger percent of people without health insurance or moving to high deductible policies. And that brings in the whole question of the underinsured. When you talk about the uninsured rate, you have in addition to that, probably another 10% of the insured population. More recent estimates suggest 14% of people who are underinsured, which means they have high deductible policies and they're paying a lot of out-of-pocket. And then one other little footnote to this, in economic hard times, before we got into the current situation, about 50% of all bankruptcies among middle-class families were essentially triggered by a big health event. And that was true of people with and without health insurance.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can sort of come back to Adam and get some perspective from the three of you on how some of these, what this context means and the work that you're doing. So.
It's interesting. In fact, I'll put in another plug for Insure Montana. We were in that in inception, and it is one of the most wonderful programs out there for health insurance. In fact, we pushed that on our clients. Some did it. We printed out the application and gave it to them. We should have filled it out for them. Some waited, and they're on that waiting list that Tim was talking about. So, very good program. If you get the opportunity, I would put your name on there, at least get on the list. As we go out to our clients are struggling in recruiting and retaining quality employees. And so we'll go out to them and say, hey, you need to offer health benefits. And they always say, we cannot afford health benefits. And so we approach it in there, usually they'll give them every year a 50 cent to an hour or to $1 an hour raise. He said, instead of giving them as a raise, why don't you give that as a benefit? That as a raise, that 50 cent an hour, little less or little more than $1,000 a year it costs them. Well, besides their FICA, their unemployment, their liability insurance, and for these contractors, their work comp, it's upwards of 30% more they're paying. So that 50 cent an hour raise costs them instead of $1,000, $1,300. Whereas the employee, when they get it, if they're in the 28% tax bracket, they're getting a little over $700 out of that $1,000. So Uncle Sam's getting it from the employer and the employee, whereas if they give that as a benefit, it's $1,000. It costs them $1,000, and the employee
It's a non-taxable benefit.
gets gets the full $1,000. And they, even if, and Tim's going to talk about health insurance, but if they can't afford health insurance, which I think they can to a point, there are so many vehicles to offer benefits. You had mentioned HSAs, which is a high deductible health insurance with a savings plan. HRAs, a health reimbursement arrangement, where the employer throws in some money. Say he can't afford health insurance, or he wants to know, I can only afford $100 a month for my employees. I can't pay any more, and if health insurance rises, I can't do it. So he throws in $100 a month into this plan. Those employees can use that for, maybe they go and get individual health insurance, or they use it, their spouse has a health plan. So they use it as part of the deductible, or for eye care, or for dental care, whatever. He's helping them out. He's offering benefits to those employees. And of course, everyone knows the FSA, or the cafeteria plan, Section 125 plan. Excellent way to save money, where an employee can take that out of it, those monies out of his check, and pre-tax, so he's not paying that 28%. And he uses those for, or she uses those for health care expenses, eye care, dental care. Only problem with the FSA is it's the use it or lose it. You have to use it within that plan year, or you lose it. But there are many avenues out there that you can offer benefits. It's interesting, one of our clients today faxed over or emailed over rate changes on their health insurance plan, and they were lower. And so I called up and I said, these got to be wrong, or I'm reading these wrong, they're lower. Well, they've self-insured, and Tim would know better on this, they've self-insured to a point, and then they have a stop loss after that. People are coming up with ways to provide health care, but so it doesn't cost as much. So there are vehicles that you as employers, we're using them as an employer, they're very successful for us, that you can offer benefits, health benefits to your employees at a way that you can afford.
Tim, is that similar to your
Yeah,
perspective?
It is. Steve hit some good points, but there are some points that I think that we forget to miss when we talk about the uninsured. We all have choice. There are some people that choose to go uninsured because they don't want to pay the premium. Generally, those people are healthy and young individuals. Those are the types of individuals that you want in these health policies, because it can grow pools. The pools are younger, they're healthier. Because what tends to happen with pools is when rates start to skyrocket, the healthy groups start to jump. So the people that are there are unhealthy and they're stuck. They can't go anywhere because they're going to be looked at and they're going to be rated on what their current risk is. So encouraging your young employees to take it, because it's a big benefit. I look at it from a point of view as when I'm speaking to an employer is, I tell you, as Steve said, it's about $13,000 of what it takes for a middle-class family to go into medical bankruptcy. I've seen a lot of that because they have not had any type of health care coverage. Whether it's a high deductible health plan, at least what you want to do is guard against that, because the assets that you have will disappear. What Adam said about a lot of those programs are really true. They are true. Whatever you can do to bring that to the table as employers is really important. Healthcare costs they're going to go up, period. And as Steve has said, there may not be an end in sight, but what can you do to take those dollars and keep them going from being spiked to little speed bumps? Well, the one thing that you want to look into are pooling. As Steve said, there are associations out there that you can be pooled with, which are managed to a point where they're trying to eliminate these double-digit increases. They're trying to keep them at speed bumps, under 8%, under 10%, because we know as costs go up, the employer sits back and says, okay, we're paying 100% of the employee coverage this year. We got to drop that down to 75%. So as an employee, you got to pick that up. I work for an insurance company myself, and the premium for my family is $1,000. I end up paying about $400 of that. And because I find that, to me, that is extremely important because of the young kids I have and the assets that we've built. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see any of those assets have to be liquidated because I've got huge claims that I've got to pay for. But yet, when I go out and I speak with employers, I do get that. Well, we can't afford that. Well, what can you do to provide some type of a benefit for your employees? You can start out with something bare bone, and as you move along, it can increase. Maybe something comes along like the Insure Montana program did, where it can provide a tax credit back to you to where the tax credit you get back is almost half of what the premium you pay for the year. I mean, that is huge. And a lot of employers that are in that Insure Montana program are really enjoying it. With health insurance, you know, especially with small groups, the one thing that you've got to look at is there's two things to health insurance, either group or individual. Everybody here that I see here, you're better off to go a group basis rather than individual, because when you go to an individual coverage, what you're doing is you're saying, this is my health history, I'm going to the carrier, I want you to insure me, okay? You may think you're healthy, but that's subjective, and when somebody else is looking at what you've got and using numbers to calculate what your risk is going to be. Okay, individual coverage is not guaranteed. You can be declined. So employers that look at, well, you know, we've got 5 employees, I'll let them go get their coverage on their own. Out of those 4, 2 of them will be denied because they've got health issues that may seem minor to them, but to a carrier, they can be considered catastrophic in the long-term sense. So when you're looking at small group health insurance, as what Neil has said, they're looking at HSAs. What can you do? You want to lower that premium? Well, if you've got a high deductible health plan, what can you fund to your employee to make it attractive to them? I've got some employers that do that. They fund $100 a month to each employee for their health savings account. And it takes a while to fund that deductible, but once you've done that and you've gone beyond that, you know, to me, it's a gravy train, because you can think about it and say, well, I've got my deductible satisfied, so if anything happens to myself or my family, it's not coming out of my own pocket. I may have to rebuild that, but you take your chances. You know, you're hoping that nothing ever happens to you, so you just keep building on those HSAs. Those high deductible health plans are good things. They have not caught on very well in Montana, and from my perspective, it's because of our wages are so small that when an employee has to pay a portion of their coverage, they can't fund that that health savings account. So that becomes a drawback to the employer, because now they look like they're trying to get off cheap when they're saying, no, this is what we need to do. So when you're looking at plan designs and you've got your budget, you know, you've got to look at things like that. You've got to look at pooling concepts. As Steve said, Senator Baucus has got this, it's called Call to Action. It's in their healthcare reform. And that's what he's trying to do. He wants to build up pools to where those pools can leverage out healthcare premiums. The larger and healthier the pool, the better risk you got, the lower premium you're going to have. He's trying to spread that out because he's looking for 3 things. Affordability is key number 1. Access to healthcare is really important. And quality is huge, because the quality in the state of Montana is much different than you'd find in Wyoming, you'd find in North Dakota. The access in Montana could be greater, it could be less than any of the surrounding states. So when you've got friends and family that see a provider and so forth, whether or not they can get into them can be a big deal. Steve had mentioned about a single payer system. We've got that right now, and it's called Medicare. And it is on the brink I think of, in my opinion anyway, of going under. Because you've got baby boomers that are starting to reach that age, and over the past 20 years, they've used a lot of health care. So what's going to happen is Congress has tried to take the reimbursement that physicians get, and they've tried to drive it down. Well, when you do that, it's just like anything else. The doctors will pull out of Medicare. They won't take any Medicare patients. A friend of mine who's a physician in Butte told me exactly that. He goes, I can only take 5% of Medicare patients because I lose money. If I lose money, what am I in practice for? So with single payer systems, yeah, there can be good things, but there can also be bad things about what's going to happen with that. 2 things that I've read in this that really intrigue me, and healthcare companies are starting to look at this, are preventative and wellness services. That's a caveat Baucus is looking at too, and if you prevent it now, if you can find something as of right now, it eliminates the big cost down the road. Wellness. So everybody in this room, what do you do to keep yourself healthy? You know, if you smoke, have you tried quitting smoking? If you're overweight, have you tried to lose weight? Those are going to be issues that you're going to hear talked about, I think, in the next 4 years, is going to be wellness and preventative care. A lot of carriers are doing this right now. For example, the State Bar of Montana they are having all their members obtain a blood panel. They're going to take those statistics and they're going to try to find the drivers for why these premiums are going up. And when they do, they're going to try to provide tools to people that, hey, if you are overweight, here are some tools that you can use to try to bring your weight down. Because now we're looking at changing behavior. Okay, that's something, and you talk about healthcare, changing behavior is somewhere over here. But that's exactly what we're trying to do, is we've got to change our behavior on healthcare as consumers. We consume a lot of healthcare. And as the price goes up, we consume even more.
So Neil, are you using some of these types of tools in your business right now?
Well, we are, and I think I guess what is, according to that chart, almost a big business, although we certainly don't think of ourselves that way. We've gone through, I guess we've been in business for about 13 years, and I think we've had, I'd say, a minimum of 5 or 6 different healthcare plans, because what tends to happen is you find something. We wanted to start out with what I think has always been sort of considered a Cadillac plan, because the 3 of us that started the brewery came from not particularly great employment backgrounds, as far as we had bosses that we didn't think cared about employees and whatnot, and we always wanted to make sure that our employees didn't think that way about us. So we wanted to really make sure the benefits made sense. And over the years, we find out that every 2-3 years, whatever the case may be, you suddenly see one of those spike years where instead of having that 7 or 8% increase on your premiums, you see a 20 or 30 or 40% increase, and you say at that point in time, well, we're not going to take that. And if you're not going to take that, you have to shop around. And for the most part, we've been able to find similar types of coverage, occasionally a little bit weaker here or there, but at least the similar kind of plans, and get the rates down so we're not paying substantially more than we have in the past. And at the same time, if we went back to anywhere from 1995 till probably about 2001 or 2002, the company paid 100% of the premiums. And if we're here today, we're paying, I think, 90-ish% on families and about 99% for individuals. So we still cover the vast majority of it, but we have at least shifted a little bit onto employees. So if nothing else, they recognize there's real money involved. But I think what we're doing right now, we had another one of those years where when we looked at our current plan, it was jumping 41% this year. And we didn't want to pay 41% more. And we were able to find, at this point in time, actually I think a little bit better plan for considerably less dollars. At the same time, 2 years ago we first looked at the high deductible plans and decided at that point in time we weren't going to make a move that direction. I think this year we're quite likely going to offer a high deductible plan or kind of our previous type plan and let employees pick and choose which one they prefer. So, maybe we'll wind up with 20 and 20 or whatever the case may be. But those high deductible plans are making more and more sense to me, not because it saves the company money so much as I think the coverage is actually probably better for employees, especially if you're tying in with one of those HSAs, the health savings accounts. Because what we see is that for the same total monthly dollar amount or annual dollar amount it would cost to fund our traditional health plan, we can fund one of these high deductible health plans, and the savings we can roll into a health savings account and actually contribute towards the employee. So it might be $100 a month for every employee, maybe every individual, and $200 a month for every family employee goes into their health savings account from the company. Well, even if that deductible and maximum out of pocket is around $3,000, within a year as an individual you'd have had $1,200 from the company, and hopefully you're contributing yourself. We've had a flex plan in the past. The HSA kind of replaces that. So if you as an individual have been used to putting some of your money out of your paycheck going into a flex plan to cover dental, vision, deductibles, you're building up the same sort of thing. And in this case, the HSA, you actually keep that money. If you don't spend it all in a year, it doesn't go away. It keeps building and building. So that hopefully, if you have decent health, they don't have something catastrophic happen, within 3 or 4 years, you got the entire amount you could possibly spend in a year between your deductibles and your max out of pocket. You've actually built up your health savings account to cover that. And the goal is that down the road, when our workforce is primarily 20s and 30s, when you're 65 or 67 or 72, whatever the age is for Medicare at that point in time, that money is now yours to do with what you will. It doesn't have to be health related at that point in time. You've actually built it up as an additional kind of retirement plan. So I sort of think it's quite possibly a better plan than the traditional. You're not getting that nice little $20, $30 copay, but at the same time, you're paying this out of money that the company's contributed towards it, you've been building up towards it, and I think if you did have anything really major happen, it's really 100% covered once you hit that deductible. So we're really looking at those sort of plans, but what I would say to any business owner is, if there's any way to fund anything, even if it is really a small amount to get started, it's a great benefit for employees. And as scary as those little charts are that show those huge spikes, if you're willing to take the time and effort, and as you get a decent-sized workforce, it is effort because everyone fills out their forms and all that sort of stuff, you can usually find some way to mitigate those so you don't have that huge spike. I think probably the worst increase we've actually had to take, where we couldn't find a better option, maybe like at 12 to 15%, that's maybe 1 or 2 times over 13 years. So there are ways to get around those huge increases. I'll ask 2 questions before we go to the audience, because I'd always like to know. With that state program, is there a maximum number of employees that?
Yeah, there is. It's the maximum number of employees for the Insure Montana program is 9. Okay. Depending on the funding that the legislature gets, they could expand it. But right now, it's from 2 to 9 is what the threshold is.
Another question was, so if you are 9 or fewer employees and you're on that waiting list, but you in the meantime put something together as a plan that doesn't in any way exclude you from joining it when your number comes up, just because you have some other plan in place?
Well, it excludes you from the purchasing pool, but you still are eligible for the tax credit.
Okay.
I have a question for Steve.
Sure.
The 6 or 7% inflation number that you quoted, is that a nationwide number, or?
Yes.
Is Montana any different than that?
My research shows that when you look at these national patterns and numbers, sometimes the magnitudes are obviously much higher. But percentage change and percentage shares in that, we reflect the nation quite a bit.
So if you had an insurance agent answer your question, which I did last week, why do you want X amount more?
Right.
And I was told that they view inflation, medical inflation, at 11.5%. Any idea why they might be?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to dig into what data source they're using and all that. I know that frequently it's more the claims experience
Yeah.
and what's happening at
Yeah.
claims levels.
Yeah,
than
you're
what-
talking about medical trend, and they use that, a carrier uses their claims experience of how maybe their pool or their block of business is running to determine, and they'll see, what they think, just on medical trend, where they think it's going. So really, what they're stating is possibly healthcare claim could be 13% more next year than it is this year. So carriers they're trying to hammer down that medical trend as much as possible, which is running between 11 and 13%.
So are you saying they're looking at their own experience, their own company experience?
Well, yeah, because
Our
those.
experiences?
Yeah, well, you got to remember, the claims experience, their experience is your experience too. So yeah, they do look at that when they look at renewing rates, because the factors that they look at when they renew rates, one would be medical trend, another would be demographic changes. And as Neil had said, these 41% increases, they can happen. You can have a good year, medical-wise, but because your demographics change.
Right.
Maybe you lose some 20-year-olds, but you gather some 50-year-olds.
High-end consumers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then they also, and depending on, another thing that they'll tend to look at is just, then they look at your utilization too, because some carriers will look at you specifically along with their medical trend to see, okay, if you've got high utilization up here and the medical trend is here, they may just say, well, according to what we see maybe the last year or two, this is where you need to be for us to cover the claims going forward. And when they do that, they're looking at long-term chronic conditions.
You know, the utilization trends is a lot of interest to me, I guess. I work for the city, so you've got a pool of 400 or 500 people, and there's chronically some individuals that are high utilizers. They use every single day of sick leave that they've got. They're chronically sniffling and unhappy. They don't take very good care of it. They don't exercise. They've got bags of Doritos munching on all day long. I don't mean to make the most possible gross stereotype, but there are a lot of employees that fit that classic stereotype of somebody who you'd look at it and expect that they're going to need a whole lot of health care. And in fact, they do.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on in the industry to manage the cost of health care itself and the cost of premiums in regard to that element of the pool?
Well, that's where your preventative and your wellness issues are coming about. Because your employee right there, you got to change his behavior somehow or another. Whether or not he does it, that's going to be up to him. But you're seeing carriers start to work towards preventative care. You're seeing more preventative benefits out of it. You're seeing incentives for wellness programs. Western States implemented a wellness program for us earlier this year. It's worked out great. There have been some women that have been overweight. They've been contacted by the Mayo Clinic. They've got access to a nurse line, and what they've done is they formed a little group themselves, and they've incentivized themselves to lose so many pounds. So they're taking that literally and trying to change their behavior. That's something that is extremely tough to do with employees. Getting a person to stop smoking after 40 years is extremely tough. Will they stop? Probably not. So you incur that healthcare cost because he may develop cardiovascular disease, emphysema, which now your utilization just goes like this because he is going to, and he won't, and the thing is, the people that don't change their behavior are the ones that won't leave. They'll stay at their jobs just for the healthcare period.
And now they can't get insured if they leave that program they've been on.
Right.
There's a controversial trend on this, and they've used this, they call it the defined benefit, defined contribution. The defined benefit is a group plan. These are the benefits you're going to get, costs go up. The defined contribution is, hey, I as the employer, I'm going to pay this amount of money. And why it's controversial is they're saying, okay, you guys, I'm going to give you $300 a month in a plan. You go buy this individual health insurance. You're healthy, it's cheaper than group plan. You can take it with you. If you get fired or laid off, you can take it with you. And it's a better plan. And then those people that are unhealthy, well, they can't get this individual, but then they go to the state plan, and it's about the same, according to the people, the same cost as a group plan. Now, people are saying, hey, you know, that's not right. That's discriminating against unhealthy people. And then the counter to that was, well, you're discriminating against healthy people. And we live in a world of discrimination. You do what's best. And so there is a trend in there, right or wrong, you know, that's up to an employer on the ethics of that, where they're giving money out there and say, use it for whatever you want. You want it to self-insure yourself and just use it for medical expenses, or your spouse has a plan and you use it for that, or you buy health insurance with it. But I know my costs are going to be $300 a month. They're not going to increase. So it is very controversial.
It is. Just to add on that, the one thing about, because I see employers trying to do that, you got to be very careful, because there is small group reform law in Montana that states that if an employer has more than 2 employees and you try to buy an individual plan for that person, you're violating small group reform. What can happen is, and I know this goes on because I've seen it go on, the guy gets the individual health plan, the employer's sending in a business check. If the carrier happens to find out, they can go back and they can cancel that plan, very well go back to the beginning and refund the premiums back to the employer. And if there are claims out there, those claims will be retroactive and they'll be denied. So be very careful of that, because because what Adam's saying is right. That happens out there. But all I can say is, if you were to come to me, I'm going to tell you don't do it, because if you get caught, your employee suffers, and you're going to be forced to take, if you're going to grab insurance, you're going to be forced onto a small group health plan.
And that's why they use the avenue of the health reimbursement arrangement. It's a plan where they put the money into the plan and they say, employee, you do what you want with that. We're not paying for that. You do what you want for it. So, yeah, he's right. It is against the law, and so that's why they use the plan to make it legal.
What about an independent contractor chooses, say he's an employee of himself, obviously?
Okay. Well,
He seeks a private plan. It kind of fringes on what you're talking about. Can he be pooled?
Yeah. Okay, that's where you got to look into association health plans. For example, the Montana Chamber, they will allow sole proprietors, as long as you don't have any other employees, they will allow sole proprietors into that for one employee. But your selection is primarily one plan, and that's an HDHP plan. Okay?
High deductible.
High deductible health plan is what you're looking at. That is getting to be, some associations, like the Chamber, as I just said, it's groups are supposed to be 2 to 50. Associations still follow the Department of Insurance and the state regulations, but they can also do some tweaking on their eligibility with that when it comes to letting groups of one onto a health plan. The problem with that, I see the most, is you could be perfectly healthy, and a carrier would look at that and they would try to keep your premium maybe artificially higher, because they would want you to go to an individual health plan. Because if that association states that, well, we let groups of one on, here's the plan. If you've got any health issues, you're still eligible for that. Well, they might not be able to get the table level they need, they think, to cover those types of health issues.
So it's a premium increase based on...
On groups of one.
Can I ask this gentleman a question? On your reflection up there on some of your costs overall, there was an extreme rise, a rapid rise to begin with on the double digit. Is there an accountability on that? I mean, what would you call that? Why would it rise so rapidly? I see that it's declining.
Sometimes it's technology, the new technology in healthcare, and whether it's procedures, devices, different protocols that are very expensive early on. Heart surgery is a classic example, where you're up high on the learning curve in terms of cost, and then as a procedure or protocol that's used more and more, and people are demanding it as soon as it's available. So it's embedded into healthcare costs right at the get-go. But then as that becomes more familiar and more docs use it, and there's more time series data on how to make it even better and more safe and effective, that cost comes down. The other part of it is on that spike is that, I'd have to go back to the exact year and look at that, but when we had HMOs at first, HMOs, when they got into business, picked out really sort of the best of the crop.
Yeah, they cherry picked.
And so you started getting some declines in healthcare costs on the downslope of the mountain. And that was in the late 80s, early 90s. And then that started running out in about the mid-90s. So then the sledding or skiing got a little more slow-sloped in terms of...
How does CHIPS play into this?
Children's Health Insurance Program is part of the Public Health Insurance Program.
They just expanded that here in the last year and a half or 2 years, didn't they?
What happened in Montana is we just increased the, it's for low-income, for kids from low-income families, and they increased the level of income you needed to have to be eligible to 150% of the poverty level, which is basically 1.5 times above poverty. And there was an increase in enrollment up to about 13,000. And now with the passage in this recent election of I-155, the hope there is that we will be able to expand it again and bring in more federal dollars to increase. And basically, long-term, is that if that all unfolds the way the supporters hope, it would cover 30,000 out of 35,000 children who are insured. As an economist, I look at those kinds of programs and ask, well, what is the economic return to various stakeholders, to employers, to taxpayers? And the economic returns are quite high because you're bringing in federal dollars, which stimulates the economy. You're reducing uncompensated care cost when you insure more kids, which reduces the cost shift on health insurance premiums. And overall, you look at that and you're getting about $2.50 return for every state dollar you're spending. So it's a pretty good deal.
So we're running short on time, but let's take one more question and then people can stick around and continue the conversation and have some more food as well. Chuck?
I had a question along the lines of the health maintenance, and I heard somewhere where people are spending a couple $1 billion a year out of pocket on alternative therapies. And are those covered under this health maintenance thing? Can someone go get a massage or acupuncture?
Well, your carriers are following primarily your AMA or your Montana Medical Association. I just had this conversation with a naturopath yesterday. The naturopaths, I think, can do good things, but if you talk to an MD about it, they're going to have differing opinions. Well, a lot of it comes back to is, a naturopath is only going to be able to do so much, where an MD says, well, you know what, we can cut and slice, when it comes to diseases such as cancer, cardiovascular disease. So carriers are really going to follow what the AMA says. If they're saying, we need to allow naturopaths, or you see more naturopaths and more MDs, I guess, getting along and so forth, to where carriers start to recognize their perspective, then you'll start to see more naturopaths covered. Massage therapy, from a standpoint, that works great, but a carrier is going to look at that and say, well, are you getting a massage for convenience sake, or are you getting a massage because it's medically necessary? Carriers have what they have, it's called medical policy. And if those of you have been insured that ever had a claim denied stating quote unquote medical policy, they're looking at medical necessity of certain procedures. A massage, whether it's medically necessary or not, well, if you might hear a carrier say, well, physical therapy can provide you the same type of benefit as you would get from massage therapy. So to me, that's always been up in the air. I don't agree with a lot what carriers do. I think more alternative medicine should be involved with that, because even if it's convenience sake, if it can keep you from seeing the doctor, why not utilize it?
And I'd say we definitely see that increasing, the number of benefits that are covered. A lot of times it'll be if the doctor recommends it or whatnot, but I'd say quite often now, chiropractors, massage, acupuncture, a lot of those will be covered in some plans, may not in others, and a lot of times it's, if your doctor said to do it, that's one thing. If you just do it on your own, it's a whole different thing.
Well, but even that, chiropractors are a good point. 10 or 12 years ago, most carriers didn't care to cover chiropractors until they started to see the benefit chiropractors bring to the table. Well, now most health plans will cover chiropractors. It's going to take acupuncturists, massage therapists that much longer to show the benefit to a health carrier. I can help reduce your cost. If you can help reduce a carrier's cost, they're going to think about it. But at this point in time, they don't think that it's going to reduce costs, because people are going to use them for convenience. They're going to end up paying for them. So they're just going to say it's going to increase our costs because they don't see the benefit of how it can reduce.
But wouldn't it fall into preventative and wellness programs as well?
Like I said, when you have a massage, what's the reason you're having it done for? What's it going to do wellness-wise for you? Other than it can make you feel better, that's great. But a carrier will look at that and say, show me the statistics that it's going to help reduce the cost. Does it help a person that has cardiovascular disease?
Well, for instance, it's a big aid for stress, which is a huge promotion for any and all diseases. So I would assume that would kind of correlate on some level.
Well, but the thing, a carrier starts to look at that. Okay, if we cover a massage therapy, do we limit it like they do chiropractors? Generally, they have a limit for that. Well, maybe you see a massage therapist 3 times a year. Well, for wellness issues, that's probably not enough to relieve stress at some point, you know, so again, we start seeing the utilization start to go up. You know, that's why you're seeing carriers cap benefits out now for chiropractors and certain other things, because of the utilization is high enough, but they can cap it here and say, okay, we can rate for that factor.
I think that would be a good attraction if you just put a limit on it, say you get so many massages a year, you would get that younger pool in that are out, that are athletic, and then they get their massage and they're paying into the pool, you know, on a health maintenance positive thing, instead of the reverse of being sick and then going to get it.
But it's always going to be, what's the cost to that young person? If you think back to when you were in your early 20s, how many of us here had health care coverage? How many thought about it? Me? I didn't think about it until I started working for Blue Cross Blue Shield. I didn't. That's where I started to see a lot of these experiences.
There's been a lot of helpful information here, but I feel like I need a lot more. Where do I go to learn more about what I need to figure out? What's a good resource?
What do you want to figure out? What question?
My question is similar to the gentleman's. I'm an LLC, one person, young, healthy. What's the smartest move for me? But I don't want to ask my individual question in a group of 30 to 20.
Okay. That could very well be me.
Okay.
Yeah, Adam and Tim are probably both great resources.
There are ways in a Section 105 plan that you could do it pre-tax, so you're saving some money on that. And your question right there, you know, this we're talking about HSA, high deductible plans. So the money that's saved by going up for a high deductible plan, use for those, put it into that HSA. Those 3 or 2 or 3 treatments have been paid for 3 times by the money that you've saved by going to a high deductible plan. So you're kind of self-insuring for a little bit, and it pays back dividends.
Say that last sentence again, that if you roll in an HSA, it pays for itself by not going into a high deductible plan?
So you go into a high deductible plan, you're paying less than you normally would, and you throw that savings, or part of the savings, whatever, into the savings plan, the HSA. And so you can use those, and it doesn't matter. It could be, you know, acupuncture, dental care, whatever. You use those monies that you've saved that are collecting interest. You use those monies to pay for things like that. And so what you're doing is you're paying less in health insurance and saving that money for something that maybe health insurance doesn't cover, or for the small things.
Massage therapy and a naturopath and those.
Exactly.
So both of these guys would be great resources. I think, Steve, do you know of any sort of consumer websites or health-oriented, or maybe anybody in the audience, of places that people can turn for more information?
The new Health Insurance Solution is a great book. THNIS.com.
THNIS.com.
So let's wrap it up. If people have more questions, everyone's here to continue to talk and mingle. We do have a few announcements, and I also want to thank our sponsors for our education lecture series: Balance Tech, Rockingham Design, Williams Real Estate, Missoula Independent, Livesey, and the School of Business Administration. So hopefully you got some valuable information here and have some ideas going forward with your business or as a consumer of healthcare. Jenny, do you want to announce the film festival?
Right up here we have a little box for Enter to Win. The SBC is hosting the Wild and Scenic Environmental Film Festival on December 4th at the Wilma. And it's going to be an amazing film festival with award-winning documentary films. We're going to have several of our nonprofit environmental members that will be tabling at the event. And we're going to have some great Patagonia stuff that we're giving away, raffles and whatnot. And the event is going to be a carbon neutral event. We're purchasing Montana-based carbon offsets from one of our members, Clear Sky Climate Solutions. It's going to be an amazing night. So if you guys want to pick up a flyer that we have here, Enter to Win tickets. We also have tickets for sale, $11. Buy one, get one free with student ID.
And we are going to have a door prize drawing in just a minute. Our next lecture will be on scooters in the sustainable transportation mix on January 15th. So let's thank our sponsors. Thank you, or panelists, sorry. Thank you so much for being here.